Hello and welcome to Books and More. At Books and More, our motto is that knowledge can always be shared, and we are here to share knowledge. But we also maintain that knowledge is not limited to books, but it is things, people, and experiences that also bring knowledge to us. Today, we have a very special guest who has a decade of experience in meditation, and she has an organization called Sipanome and a meditation app. Please welcome Mary Meckley. Hi, Mary.
Hello, it's such an honor to be here, Vidu. It's just thank you
Same
so much
here.
for having me.
So excited to have you.
Thank you.
So let's begin with your journey of meditation. Like you always wanted to be into this as a meditation coach, or you it just came through. How was it?
I started my journey over 20 years ago, and I lived in Asia, and I really studied a lot of the arts there. And I lived for 5 years in Japan, and I was able to study the Japanese tea ceremony. And I also studied ikebana, which is Japanese floral arranging. And I studied even feng shui from China, and I studied yoga and meditation with an Indian influence from India. There are so many different styles of meditation and yoga, especially in the US. People have kind of branched off and formed things that almost don't look recognizable to yoga or meditation that's classical from India. But I do and share the classic yoga and meditation. And I um, returned to the United States after living in Asia for many years. And I really missed that connection with, especially the way the arts were so alive and well in Asia. And when I went back to the States, it was not so mainstream as it is now, yoga and meditation. It was just kind of taking off at that point. In some states, for example, in California, it was, fully mainstream there. But in many of the states in the US, it was pretty new. So I moved to a place with my family in Florida. And I was living in an area of Florida that was not so progressive it wasn't so diverse or progressive. And when I would tell people I wanted to share yoga or meditation, they actually thought I was in a cult. So they really were not open and receptive to it at all. And now it has changed. I'm very happy to say there's yoga studios on every corner, but it really has been pretty much in the past 5 or so years where that was the case in the smaller region of Florida where I was living. And so I just really wanted to share and connect with people who were doing yoga and meditation. So I went online and I decided to share a podcast. And I did it in a way that would help me with my own meditation ritual. So I decided to do a daily meditation podcast where I show up every day. And I do show up every day. I've had the podcast now for almost 7 years. And I remember starting off, and podcasting was available 7 years ago, but it wasn't so popular as it is now. And so there weren't so many listeners. And I just remember being excited when I first started and there would be 50 people listening. I was thinking, oh my goodness, can you imagine a room where there are 50 people? That's so many people. And after 7 years and meditation has become so popular, I'm excited to say we have nearly 2 million listeners on the podcast every month. And so it has just grown organically. And the way I share meditation kind of weaves the different traditions that I studied when I was in Asia. So, for example, I have a theme each week, and that's very common in the Japanese tea ceremony where there's a theme. And the tea ceremony isn't really about tea. It's very much kind of similar to meditation in that it's a way to relax and focus on something that lifts you up towards your higher aspirations. So there will be tea instruments that are chosen and selected specifically to suit the theme. It's usually very seasonal. There are elements of nature. There'll be an alcove with a scroll that will have a poem about something to do with the theme of the tea ceremony. The food or sweets, if those are served, will have to do with the theme. The ikebana, Japanese flower arrangement, will have to do with the theme. So on the podcast, I have a theme each week. And then every day during the week, we explore a different technique. We always start off with a visualization. I start every series on a Sunday, and you just kind of get ready for the week and relax and do a visualization about the upcoming theme. And then on Monday, we do an affirmation. On Tuesday, we do a breathing technique. Wednesday, we do a mudra. Thursday, we do a chakra focus. And Friday, we incorporate all those techniques and layer them together in one meditation. And then Saturday is usually a walking meditation. So I do that same flow every single week on the podcast. And it's my own ritual that I do. So this is the theme that I do each week in the podcast. And it's the flow I do every week. Yeah, so that's how I got started, and that's what I do now.
That is so nice. And I didn't know so many techniques about the Japanese culture. And yeah, I just read the book Ikigai, and that's how I know some of the things. But there are so many techniques which you have told. And these are pretty new for me, and I believe for my viewers as well. And regarding the yoga, so you picked up from India, or even in Japan, it's frequent, like people do yoga and those things.
Well, when I was living in Japan, it wasn't common, but it is now. It's very common now, I think, in many places around the world. But I studied under a school from the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda, who was one of the first Westerner or the first yogis to come to teach Westerners meditation. And so, of course, he's the author of the classic book, Autobiography of a Yogi. And so his teachings are really what I share, the style of yoga, the style of meditation. I share Hatha yoga. On the podcast, of course, I share meditation only. But on my app, I share a little bit of yoga. I customize a yoga asana, a yoga pose for the week's theme. So I have an app for people who want to go a little more deeply into meditation. That's where I have 30-minute guided meditations. The podcast is really just a short little meditation. And that's often where people begin. They just have trouble sitting down for a long meditation. So they want just a short little meditation. And so the app works well for them.
Even for new listeners, I have a question, like people who are new to meditation, how do they start? Like many people who are experienced, they would say that you start meditation and you feel better. But starting meditation and concentrating on it is itself a challenge, I feel, for beginners.
It's true. So I think that the way to start meditating, of course, in India and many Asian countries, it's just so woven into the culture that I think it must be so much easier to do this. But in many Western countries, people aren't really encouraged to slow down and take a break. So your question is so important. Where I started to meditate was actually with a cup of tea. In fact, my company or my business is called Sip, like sipping tea, and Om for meditation, because it all started with tea. And I recommend that somebody who wants to meditate and they're new to it, maybe start with just sitting down and being still. So if they're sipping a cup of tea, I actually happen to have some tea here, and they might just sit and just relax, not read their text messages, not flip through a magazine, but really just sit, maybe somewhere that is not likely to be a place of commotion or where they're not likely to be interrupted, and just relax, because we don't always know how to be still. And especially if we're go, 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 we're always on the go and we think we have to produce and get all these things done, that it can take some practice just getting used to sitting in stillness. And so for myself, I was working at a company in Japan. It was a corporation, And I was the only foreigner there. I was working in their international program. And I remember several times throughout the day, there would be a break. And there were actual ladies who would give everybody tea. Everybody would be poured tea. And there were over 200 people in my section. So that was a lot of people. And everybody would sit down and just relax. Some people would take a nap or just, I thought they were taking a nap, but actually many of them were meditating. And I didn't know about meditation so much then. And so I would think that, oh, well, they're taking all these breaks because in the West, we don't have breaks like that. In fact, we often work through our lunch. And so I would just think, oh, this is ridiculous. I don't need this tea, and I'm just going to work right through my break. So I thought I was being so productive. But actually, what I noticed is that after these breaks, these tea breaks, I was less productive than my colleagues. They were much more productive because they felt refreshed. And it's really, science has shown that, meditation helps to activate your prefrontal lobes, which is the reasoning, inspirational part of your brain as well. So they would be more creative, more focused. And I was just still kind of rushing around doing things, but not necessarily getting a lot done. And so I started to sit with my tea and just notice, oh, this feels kind of nice. And then pretty soon I would sit longer and longer. And then when we moved back to the US, I actually learned to meditate in the United States. And when we moved back to the US, we were living in Seattle, Washington. And I started to become very interested in yoga and meditation both. And I just wanted more and more. It was just a natural progression. But before I could really sit down to meditate for even 5 minutes, I really had to begin to listen to my body and my mood and notice how I'm doing, check in with myself, and feel that stillness before I could actually tap into it to meditate.
I have been in the corporate world, and I've also noticed that not taking breaks or eating through the breaks or having your tea while doing the work. So that does not make you more productive. So that's what I also felt. And so, do you think meditation helps in controlling the mind?
I think that the research has shown, and there's so much more ongoing research, especially in regard to mindfulness meditation, being very present in the moment, that the prefrontal lobes of your brain is the part of your brain that helps you to relax and focus. And so, what they found with meditators is that meditators still experience stress. It's funny because many people who start meditating will often say, it's not working because I'm still feeling stress. And of course, whether we meditate or not, we're still going to experience the full range of human emotions because we're human, whether we meditate or not. And but with meditators, what scientists have discovered is that the stress, after the stress, there's a pause. And so we're not as likely to react. And you're also more likely to recover when you do become stressed. Say you lose your temper or just feel really anxious, you're much more easily able to recover than somebody who doesn't meditate. And this also helps with focus, and it also helps with creativity, because when you're more relaxed and you're able to recover faster from any kind of stimulus, even excitement is a type of stress. When you get really excited, it's kind of hard to come back down and get back to work. Well, these emotions that take us outward, whether it's really exciting or really a down experience, with meditation, you're able to much more easily come back in to your center, you could call it, and focus.
Right. So, how has meditation helped you, benefited in personal life?
Yes, so meditation has helped me enormously. And sometimes as we go through our days, we don't often notice how much it helps us. But for example, during these times we're living in a pandemic, there's a lot of disruption and uncertainty. And so when I see all this outside stimulus, all this stuff happening outside of me, instead of getting caught up into it, into like a vortex of vritti, is what it's called. Instead of my emotions being caught up in this vortex of oh, disruption, uncertainty, the stress, I am much more able to stay centered and be able to notice whatever's going on in the world, whether things are going really well or things aren't going well. I can tap into myself and find peace. So peace is not out there waiting to land there. Peace is within me, and I can tap into it whenever I need to, regardless of what's happening. I don't have to wait for things to be peaceful around me in order to feel at peace. It's not dictated by external stimulus. It's managed by my own reaction, my own response to stress. And so you begin to, when you meditate, do you meditate?
Yes, I do.
I thought
And
you,
and I listen to your podcast every day.
oh my goodness, I'm very honored. Thank you. That really, it always amazes me when I record. I just record, and I sometimes forget, oh, there's people who might be listening, to me. So I'm sure you feel the same way, even during this interview, we're having such a nice conversation, and then it's like,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, people are going to be watching or listening. And I never think of that though when I'm actually recording a meditation or doing an interview. But you asked me, or I asked you if you meditated, and you said yes. So you will notice that during your most difficult moments, you really notice meditation is like a lifeline. It's an anchor. And because it's familiar, it's something that you train your brain. Literally, the neural pathways in your brain actually change when you meditate for 60 days consistently for 10 to 15 minutes a day. You've already created new neural pathways in your brain. Even after meditating consistently for 2 weeks or 10 to 15 minutes at a time, you notice changes. So anybody can access this special way to anchor yourself, especially during these times, or really during any time. In a short amount of time, you can begin to notice results.
So I was saying I have been following your podcast for a long time, and it has helped me a lot. So, but I heard in one of your podcasts that you said if you are in a stressful situation, if you are too stressed out, you shouldn't meditate. So I and most of the people around me think that when you're depressed or stressed out, you should meditate, and that's what I advise people, and that's what people around think. So why do you say so?
Yeah, so that's kind of a fine line. I think meditation is beautiful when you are stressed and you want to calm down. When I shared that on the podcast, I was referencing when people are maybe feeling very emotionally or mentally unstable to where they're ruminating. It's the constant thoughts of real downward heaviness, maybe a deep depression, or some serious trauma where you're just not, your body is recovering and using so much energy. And meditation takes energy. Many people think that meditation is passive, but it's actually incredibly dynamic. And so if you're sick, even maybe you have a fever or a really terrible cough, you're sick, it's not always the best thing to meditate. It might calm you, it might make you feel better. But if you feel that your energy is really taxed, where you just are having a hard time physically, emotionally, or mentally, then meditation won't necessarily help someone. And in some cases, I've read some research where if the person is severely depressed or an extreme trauma, doing a meditation technique, such as doing a breathing technique or visualizing um, or repeating an affirmation, that can help. That's a meditation technique because that's going to help your nervous system and it doesn't take too much out of you, too much energy. But to sit down and close your eyes and try to sit and meditate is maybe going to be too much for someone. So in that case, I think it's better to wait until people feel a little stronger and a little, I always say that you should meditate to the point where you feel you can meditate a little longer. Always end your meditation on a high note. And if you start off feeling really just fatigued and emotionally distraught, there's just not a lot of energy to really focus your mind and to lift you upward. It can just even sometimes make you feel more frustrated or even worse. Sometimes people will say, I meditate and I felt so stressed out because I wasn't feeling calm and I thought, oh, I'm doing something wrong. And so that's why I always recommend people just to start sitting and becoming used to feeling still within themselves, and then progressing from that to sitting a little longer and a little longer. That's why I also offer meditation techniques, because there's something that you can do instantly, whether you're seated meditating or you're standing in line at the grocery store or you've just received some really difficult news. You could, maybe do a breathing technique to help you rather than to sit, to try to meditate.
Thank you for that answer. That would be very useful for many people.
I hope so.
Yeah. So I have one question on depression. Do you think meditation can help come out of depression?
So I'm not a doctor, but I share research often on the podcast. I love to do research and share the latest research. And research shows that meditation is a fantastic way to help people who are depressed anchor themselves and calm themselves down. And meditation can actually even energize you and it lifts you up. And I think that it's important to always focus more inward and upward when you meditate, because you want to let go of the distractions. So you're focusing with how you're feeling within yourself. And when you meditate and you're feeling depressed, you begin to get in touch with your emotions. And sometimes that can be very beneficial to someone who's feeling depressed. Sometimes people become depressed because they're really out of touch with themselves emotionally and even physically in their body. To notice where you carry your stress. Each time we sit down to meditate, I like to recommend, I do a brief guidance of this on the podcast, but I do much more in depth on the app because I have more time. But each time I recommend noticing any tension you feel in your body. Notice where you hold the tension and see if you can notice what triggered that tension. And the more you do this, the more awareness you develop in regard to your mind and your body, because it is, as science has revealed, a mind-body connection. And so this is how meditation can be incredibly beneficial to somebody who's feeling depressed. It's that ability to be able to identify emotional states quickly, what triggered the states, avoid as best as possible the triggers, or at least have a way to cope or manage with those triggers. And then knowing that, okay, it's okay, I'm feeling this, but I can still meditate and feel uplifted. I can still go into a mood or an emotion that's going to uplift me. So this is how it helps people who are depressed, anxious.
Nice. So, what do you think ritual is like? How important is a ritual in meditation? Like doing it at the same time, same place every day, or it is not important at all? What do you feel?
That's a very good question. Again, ritual is incredibly important. In fact, consistency is the key to realizing the benefits of meditation. Even if you can just simply sit and just close your eyes and feel a little peace, even if you don't have time to sit down and have a full meditation every day, if you show up at the same time, if possible, in the same place. Many people have a few places, including I do have a few places where I like to meditate. And because I'm in different places. So, but when I'm in my home, there's two places in my home I like to meditate. And then when I'm outside my home, I like to meditate in another place that's easy to access. Many people have a place at their work, which I highly recommend, that is maybe a quiet room, or maybe they could create a corner somewhere, and if they have an office of their own, especially where they could spend time to meditate. But this consistency is absolutely the key. it's the same with any kind of endeavor you undertake, such as exercise, or if you're going to want to realize benefits from fitness, you would start small. If you want to end up, running half a marathon, let's say, you would maybe, if you're really out of shape, you would maybe just start walking, and then you might start, jogging a little bit. But you're going to notice that you get better and stronger, and then you'll start, running, a little more, a little longer, and pretty soon you're there. You can run, half a marathon with ease, and or at least be able to manage yourself through the marathon experience and get it done. And meditation is the same way. So that's why it's so important to have really realistic expectations when you meditate. It's so important to enjoy the process. It's not a like, oh, I have to do it. It's I get to unfold to my inner stillness. It's a get to do, and it's a treat. It's a reward for yourself. And I think we're so accustomed in the West, especially, to rewarding ourselves through activity and external action that we don't think of internal advancement and progression as being impressive. But it's actually probably even more impressive to be able to feel peace and share your peace. That's what the world needs so much of these days. So consistency is key.
Yes. And yeah, coming back to your app, Sip and Om. So you already told me why it's called Sip and Om. So there are a lot of herbal teas which the users can have. What is the connection you feel between the herbal tea and meditation?
Yes, so that is such an excellent question as well. And so herbs can benefit us in a similar way as, say, for example, a meditation technique. And it's interesting, but how I ventured into herbs is that I actually discovered I'm allergic to Camellia sinensis, the tea that we're most often sipping. Just depending on how the Camellia sinensis plant is processed, gives us green tea, white tea, black tea, oolong tea, but it all comes from the same plant. And I happened to feel my face become numb when I would sip it. And I thought, I'm having some stroke or something. And lo and behold, I am allergic to that. I'm allergic to it. So for me, that was just terrible news, because tea is something I sip all day long. It's such an important part of my life. So I ventured into the world of herbs. And actually, I found it a blessing in disguise, because um, we've lost a lot of wisdom from the herbs, especially in the West. In Asia, especially in India and China, um, the world of herbs is alive and well because it's integrated in the medical system with Ayurvedic or Chinese medicine. But in the West, where herbs used to heal and nourish, and people would turn to herbs to help them and offer them support, we've lost that, maybe because pharmaceuticals kind of took over and wanted to give people something artificial, synthetic. It's a business for them, but we really lose out on the wisdom of the herbs. We're part of nature, and plants are there for us. It's an exchange, an interchange, between nature and ourselves, and the plants are there for us to support us. So on the Sipanome app, I recommend an herb for the entire week. And I was selling those herbs, and I would like to sell them again, customized for each series, but it was really hard to find the good herbs during the pandemic. So we stopped, but we are finding some better herb suppliers now. So we may begin our herbs again. But I still wanted to share the herbs, so I at least tell people what herb they can sip. That kind of goes along with the series, because just like different mudras stimulate your brain in a particular way, mudras, how you hold your hands, the same with herbs, even more so with herbs maybe, because you're ingesting something that has been growing and has all this wisdom to impart. So that's why I share tea as well, herbal tea. Thank you.
So this question is particularly very, very close to my heart, because I have a kid, so I wanted to understand about kids and meditation. So one of my friends was saying that I make my child meditate, and I was just thinking, like, how can I make my child meditate, or is it even important for a kid? And if it is, then the kid cannot even sit for 5 minutes or 2 minutes, then how they are going to meditate. So I have two questions here. Like, is it important for kids? And if it is, then how we can make them do it?
Well, that's beautiful. You want to share meditation with your children. Good for you. I really applaud you for that. I have two sons now. They're grown, but when they were younger, um, I taught them to meditate. What I'll say is that meditation isn't something that is, set in stone for, oh, you have to sit for a certain amount of time. I always say, make your meditation ritual a little rough around the edges. Make it something you can take with you, where you can meditate in an airport, or you can meditate in your car waiting for your children to finish their soccer practice, for example, or whatever activity they're involved in. That's how I used to meditate, because that was really the only time that I had where it was uninterrupted. So um, the key is consistency, as we were talking about previously. So if you can plant this seed with your children at a young age, you've given them a gift that will last a lifetime, because you will develop this urge, like, oh, I'm really feeling, like I need to calm down or get in touch with myself. I'm going to meditate. Even if they don't develop a regular ritual, let's say they're very resistant, I don't recommend forcing your children to do that. But it's just like us. If we start fitness, or for me, I was very active. I used to dance a lot from the time I was really young. And so when I now can feel like my body needs to dance, like I need to get in shape, and I notice that because I have that body awareness. But it's the same with children. They'll have that emotional awareness the younger you start them meditating. And it can be simply even before a meal, or when they come home from school, like, oh, let's just sit. It was so hectic. Let's just sit, and they don't even have to close their eyes. I used to, where we lived previously, our home backed up to a beautiful forest, and they loved to go out there. And so I would say, let's just sit and listen to see how many sounds we can hear, because that's what meditation is. Meditation is, it's not so much about the stillness and being quiet. It's much more. It's about the awareness. And so the more you can make your children aware of how they're feeling, or you that happened today, how did that make you feel? You're actually helping them to meditate, because they get in touch with their emotions. Or, oh, I can see, you're upset. How about, or that hurt, you felt that hurt. Let's just sit down and just maybe kind of surround that area with some good, healing energy. Just they could visualize it, whatever comfort level, your children, if they're open to that. If you're open to that, some people don't feel open to that, but whatever feels right for anyone is going to really instill a sense of longing for that stillness in their lives. So one more thing I'll say about that is that for my children, we used to have, we would go and collect things for their meditation space. And in each of their rooms, they had a meditation space. And we had a little table. You could call it an altar, but we just called it a little table. And stones or leaves or sticks, whatever they found, they would put that in there. And then when they were upset, I would say, well, let's sit in this space. And they would put pictures of people that inspired them, like sometimes their best friends. And then they would sit in that place. And I noticed that they would start going there when they were upset. And I wouldn't even say anything. Eventually, they would just go and sit. But do they meditate now? So I thought that, oh, they're just going to, look how young they are. They're meditating, they're doing all these things. Well, when they got probably about 10 years old, when they really started to identify with their peers, and especially through the middle school and grades, they started to be resistant, I think mostly because no one around us did it, and because their friends' parents thought I was in some kind of cult because I meditated. And so unfortunately, they wanted to fit in with everyone, and they thought, oh, we're the only ones we know doing this, and they would start to hide their altar or their meditation space when their friends came over. And so I was so sad about that, but I didn't force it. But now I noticed both of them remembering that and doing things, doing breath work, and starting to want to do that. So it's not as though you need to have an unbroken thread. You can have times where you kind of weave in and out. The main thing is that they know you meditate and that this is important to you. And I think that no matter what you're trying to instill in your children, that they will always want to honor whatever you honor. So good for you for teaching your children how to meditate.
Yeah, and I'll try some of the things you told. In fact, I've seen like my kid sees me meditating. So one day she was just sitting, she turned on the music and she said like, I'm meditating, and she just closed her eyes. But yeah, it was just for like 10 to 15 seconds. That's the maximum she can sit.
And that's perfect because it's just the sitting. And children are supposed to be outward. They're supposed to be exploring their environment. They're supposed to be learning and growing. And so there'll come, a time when they want to just kind of sit down and let everything settle. And that can be their meditation for even just a few minutes.
So about the pandemic, like it's a very bad situation everywhere, especially in India. And you already told me how meditation has helped you cope up with pandemic. But as a meditation coach, what message do you have for people and viewers during the pandemic?
Oh, wow. I would just say, um, this time that we're going through is not unlike the day-to-day life we live, regardless of whether or not there's a pandemic. Sometimes in our life we have stress, and so we need to start to take care of ourselves a little more, do more self-care, spend more time listening to and reading and absorbing positive, uplifting types of experiences. And that's how we get through stressful situations. The world is no different. Nature is no different. We're going through times and cycles of change, and that's eternal. We are going through a pandemic. There will still be pandemics in the future. It's not as though, oh, we're stuck and how did we end up living it through this horrible time? Why did this have to happen in my senior year in high school or the year I decided to have a child? It's not like that. It's more, this is life, and whatever happens, to feel equipped to be able to still keep and share your peace. So I recommend people in the pandemic to do a little more self-care and to know that it's okay to slow down and not live life full on as it was pre-pandemic. There'll be a time for that. I think after the pandemic, it will be like the roaring 20s was. People will really, so there'll be a time to really be outward. This is a time to just be a little more inward with self-care, reflection, introspection, to develop yourself, to help others, and to also develop patience. That's really such an important quality during a time like this. It's been such a pleasure. I have to ask you, what is your favorite meditation technique that you do?
Meditation technique, I would say reflecting and journaling.
Mm.
So journaling is something I do, and I've also created a video on best ideas to journal. So
That's fantastic. It's so important. That's another part or it's another way to really go inward and be reflective and identify your emotions. You were asking about people who are depressed. Journaling, they discovered, also helps people immensely who are struggling with depression. Wow. Well, it's been such a pleasure talking with you today. Your questions have been so thoughtful and just really made me think about some things too. So I really appreciate it.
thank you so much. It's my pleasure as well, because I have been following you, and from a fan to talking to you in person, it's so great. And this was, I wasn't even expecting that I would talk to you like this, but it's so nice.
Oh, it's
And
a pleasure. I hope we talk often. Please connect with me often. So I think what you're doing is really important. Books and more. It's people can turn towards your resources during these times for support.
sure. And for my viewers, I have added all the Sip and Om and the meditation podcast link in the description, which Mary has. So go ahead, watch it. Do check out the podcast and the Sip and Om app.
Thank you so much. It's really an
Thank
honor Thank you.
Thank you. It's really nice talking to you.